everyone. Thank you for coming here today. I'm Ron Zilli, and I serve as the State Forest Deputy Division Chief for Planning. The purpose of this meeting is to share information on our post-fire recovery plans in the vicinity of Shellburg Falls on the San Am State Forest due to the impacts of the 2020 Labor Day fires. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to introduce the ODF staff we have here today that will be participating in the presentation. First, go to Kyle Kopp.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle Kopp. I'm the acting San Am unit forester out of the North Cascade District with the Oregon Department of Forestry.
Great. Austin?
Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Dixon, and I am the planning coordinator for State Forests for the North Cascade District.
Okay, great. John?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Walter. I'm the Young Stand Management Coordinator for based out of Salem, but was on North Cascade, and I'll be covering that today.
Okay. Jamal?
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jamal Reb, Recreation Planning Coordinator with Northwest Oregon area.
Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Sarah Deardahl. I'm the Aquatic and Riparian Specialist for the State Forest Division.
Thank you, Sarah. Colleen?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colleen Kaiser, and I'm the Planning Manager for State Forests.
Okay. Tyson?
Hi all, I'm Tyson Weprick. I'm the Adaptive Management Specialist with State Forests, and I work out of Salem.
Denise?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Denise Berkshire, Interpretation and Education Coordinator. I'm stationed out of the Tillamook Forest Center.
Okay. Jason?
Hey there, Jason Cox, Oregon Department of Forestry, Public Affairs.
Great. Got just a couple of other staff here I would take a minute to introduce. Liz, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz Dent, and I serve as the State Forest Division Chief for the Oregon Department of Forestry. Appreciate everyone being here today.
Great. And Andy White?
Right, good afternoon. My name is Andy White. I'm the Northwest Oregon Area Director. And thank you all for your time.
Great. And then Laura Fredrickson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Fredrickson, and I am the Recreation, Education, and Interpretation Manager located out of the Northwest Oregon area. And glad that you are all here. Thank you.
Okay, Colleen, you could go ahead and throw the presentation up now. Hopefully everyone can see that all right. So for the presentation today, I'm going to start off with some context information about state forests and a high-level summary of the impacts of the San Am State Forest from the 2020 fires. This is going to be followed by a summary of the work completed last fiscal year, fiscal 2021, and what's already been planned so far in the district's approved fiscal 2022 Annual Operations Plan, Phase 1. And then we will transition to the specifics of the Fern Ridge Forest Management Project being proposed as what we're calling Phase 2 of the district's fiscal year 2022 Annual Operations Plan. It's been just a little more than a year since the Labor Day fires dramatically affected our state. The North Cascade District staff and augmenting staff from around the state have accomplished an impressive amount of work in this time. During our post-fire recovery efforts, there has been a lot of interest in our work. Sometimes it's been controversial about the appropriate approach to take in post-fire recovery as a public land manager. As we plan for the Fern Ridge Forest Management Project, we are very mindful that it is in the vicinity of Shellburg Falls, a highly valued and heavily used recreation area that was significantly impacted by the Beachy Creek fire. Go ahead. Here is a vicinity map showing the location of the San Am State Forest, just to get everyone oriented to the forest location, which is about 30 miles east of Salem. The San Am State Forest is a 47,465 acre forest managed by the Oregon Department of Forestry that's spread across Marion, Lynn, and Clackamas counties in the Cascade Mountain foothills. By law, state forests are managed to provide social, economic, and environmental benefits to Oregonians. These benefits include healthy and productive forests that provide clean air and water, recreation and outdoor learning opportunities, and diverse native fish and wildlife habitats. Timber from state forests generate revenue for local governments that supply public services and support living wage jobs in rural communities. Go ahead, next slide, Colleen. As I begin the presentation, I think it's important to keep in mind the larger landscape where these fires occurred. The Santiam State Forest is shown in blue on this map, and it was impacted by the Beachy Creek, Lions Head, and Riverside fires. With 24,400 acres within the fire perimeters, most of which was the Beachy Creek fire. These three fires totaled over 500,000 acres and occurred in a statewide context where over 1 million acres were impacted during the 2020 wildfire season. Approximately 16,600 acres within the fire perimeters on the Santiam State Forest were burned to some degree. Resources that were impacted included public access and roads, forest stands, which burned as a mosaic pattern, recreation facilities and trails, fish and wildlife habitat, and infrastructure, including the ODF office in Lyons that was destroyed in the fires. Although the fires were very severe in many places, they burned as a mosaic across the landscape. Reading this graph from left to right, the darker green line just represents that 7,700 acres within that 24,000 acre burn perimeter were unburned, and we're very grateful for that. 3,700 acres had a low burn severity, 7,400 acres had a moderate burn severity, and 5,500 acres had a severe burn severity. This picture right here just represents some pictorial images of those varying burn severity categories as we go ahead and explain some of the work that we're going to do and relating it to burn severity, and just to give you a visual image of what the impacts really are. When I talk about that graph, this is really a fair representation of those varying burn severities and how we categorize that work. Go ahead, Colleen. So as the image shows, the stands burned in a variety of conditions. And as we approach our post-fire response, we gave very thoughtful consideration to the full suite of social, economic, and environmental benefits that Oregon State Forests provide, including reestablishing safe access for employees, operators, and the public, restoring trails and recreation infrastructure, water quality and wildlife habitat protection measures, post-fire timber harvesting, retaining legacy structures, including green trees wherever they were able to be retained when we were doing our harvesting, snags and down wood, aquatic and riparian buffers, and we took a mixed approach to reforestation. I'm now going to turn it over to Kyle Kopp, who's going to summarize the work that's been accomplished and is ongoing as part of the recovery and restoration effort. Kyle?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And again, Kyle Kopp, Acting Santiam Unit Forester here at the North Cascade District with ODF. So like Ron mentioned, a lot of work has been done since the 2020 fires, and that's what I'm going to talk about today is just some accomplishments to date within the FY 2021 plan and kind of where we're at now in the FY 2022 process. So as far as post-fire timber sale operations go, we planned and sold 10 timber sales, totaling almost 47 million board feet. We did that through 1,850 acres of modified clear cut and approximately 55 miles of roadside hazard tree mitigation partial cut, where we went along road systems and identified what trees constituted a hazard tree and needed to come down to restore that safe access. Throughout those sales, we averaged a stumpage price of $465.55 per 1,000 board feet, which generated approximately a total revenue of $21,400,000. Of those timber sales, approximately 2/3 of that revenue goes to the counties where the operation was, where it took place. And that revenue was very much needed after the 2020 fire season, provided services to those local counties for their roads departments, fire, schools, law enforcement, etc. So to date, this stuff is still going on. So we're about 63% done with that 47 million board feet and almost 30 million board feet delivered to date. I want to point out the pictures on the right side of this slide and just give you an idea of what some of the accomplished timber sales could look like out in the field. So the picture on top there is from our Niagara post-fire restoration sale, and the one below is from our 7 Mile timber sale. Both of those are on the north and south side of the Niagara sales, on the north side of the Santiam Canyon, just east of Gates, and the 7 Mile timber sale is on the south side of the Santiam Canyon, just south of Gates. For the road systems, the pictures on the right, I'll cover those first, just kind of in sequence. You know, the first picture on top is basically what we saw is a good representation of some of the road systems directly after the fire. The picture on the bottom is the initial kind of restoring at least pickup traffic access to get into some of the areas to do the initial assessment. And then the picture on the right is had roadside hazard mitigation partial cut done to it with some road repairs, and is a good representation of a road that is now safe for public travel again. So in FY21, we completed 204 miles of forest road repair that brought the roads to back to a pre-fire condition, and that was clearing of debris, removing the bank slough that may have slumped into the road. We also replaced 76 culverts that were damaged in the fire, and we're still continuing that work to get a full public access reopening and make it safe to do so. Doing that through those hazard tree removal projects, rock crushing projects, routine maintenance, and other project work. In FY 2021, a couple months after the fires, we initially had to bolster our reforestation workload. So we had already originally planned for 554 acres of initial planting with just under 250,000 Douglas fir and western red cedar seedlings. Right after the fire, I wanted to give a shout out to our Young Stand Management Program, who within weeks had procured additional seedlings and started thinking about the years ahead of us that we would need that increased seedling capacity for the reforestation effort. So directly post-fire, we ramped that up to 1,090 acres of initially planted acres, and did that with just under 400,000 seedlings from Douglas fir, western red cedar, western hemlock, grand fir, and red alder. And so I thought it was a pretty good accomplishment to share, doubling the acres with a shortened planting window and even expanding species diversity with all we had going on right after the fires. We also did a pretty new project for public forest land management, as well as even industrial private forest land management. This is kind of the first of its kind of aerial seeding 4,338 acres with Douglas fir, western red cedar, and noble fir seed. And we did this in areas that throughout that assessment that we determined were not economically feasible, either inaccessible, had a desired future condition of complex forest structure, or areas that were in draft habitat conservation areas. As we move into this winter, we have a very large reforestation workload ahead of us. We're planning on planting just over 2,700 acres and doing that with over 1 million seedlings. And it's Douglas fir, noble fir, western hemlock, and western red cedar this winter. And just to put it in context, this is roughly 5 times the district's normal reforestation workload. And as you can imagine, it's a very costly endeavor to ramp it up 5 times our yearly workload. And so we're able to do this with increased capacity, like Ron said, augmenting from other districts' help, but also organizations like American Forests donated a large sum of money, nearly $1 million, as a reforestation grant to help us with our restoration efforts. this year and in years to come. Where we're at today is in the FY22 annual operations plan, we've split it into 2 phases, and phase 1 was approved on October 5th of this year, and it consisted of 4 primary timber sales totaling 6.5 million board feet. 2 of those are post-fire restoration sales and 2 are green sales. The next step in the process is what we're doing today is getting broad stakeholder engagement on the Fern Ridge project, which will be phase 2 of the 22 AOP. And I'm going to turn it over to Austin to go into more detail on the Fern Ridge project.
Thanks, Kyle, and hello again all. My name is Austin Dixon, and I'm the planning coordinator for the North Cascade District. I'm going to start by giving a general spatial overview of the Fern Ridge project area and the resource considerations. And after that, I'll talk about the forest management component of the project before passing it off to the specialists to talk more about the project in detail. So the Fern Ridge project, it's an area of the Santiam State Forest that burned at a moderate to high severity during the Beachy Creek fire. The area has many resource considerations that we've tried to balance while developing a plan in the mindset of achieving the greatest permanent value. So now let's get to know those resource considerations and give everyone a full context of the plan. To start and get our bearings, the Fern Ridge project area is near Shelburne Falls, as you can see on the map. Shelburne Falls is a well-visited recreation site. Also on this map, you can see the yellow dash line, which shows our property boundary. And in the background is the post-fire satellite imagery, which shows the extent of the fire severity. Now we'll zoom out and see that the project is completely within the burn perimeter of the 2020 Beachy Creek fire. The fire perimeter is shown by that pink polygon you now see on the map. And with the circle, you can kind of see the area we'll be focusing on from here on out. So zoomed back in, this is an overlay of the burn severity on ODF managed lands in the project area. If the aerial photo by itself wasn't clear enough, this burn severity overlay shows you that the Fern Ridge project is concentrated in areas that burned at moderate to high severity, which are indicated by those medium and dark brown colors on the map there. And in addition to Shelburne Falls itself, there are multiple other components to the recreation infrastructure in the area. The trail network is shown here by an orange dotted line, and ODF also has built recreation in the infrastructure, or built recreation infrastructure in the area, including a picnic shelter and restrooms. And moving on to the next resource consideration. The entire Fern Ridge project area has a desired future condition of layered, which is indicated here by the green diagonal lines. Desired future condition is a strategy towards achieving a desired range of stand structures across the state forest. The forest management plan establishes target ranges for how much of the forest landscape will be managed towards 5 defined stand structure types. Layered, which is one of those 5 types and is the DFC for Fern Ridge, means a stand type where openings in the canopy persist from thinnings or from disturbance, where the shrub and herb communities must be diverse and vigorous, and where there are 2 or more distinct layers of tree canopy. Layered is the desired future condition, but the project area had a mix of pre-fire conditions. The Fern Ridge project is also entirely within a draft habitat conservation area. Habitat conservation areas are a conservation strategy within the draft habitat conservation plan. Once the habitat conservation plan is finalized, HCAs will provide protection for threatened and endangered species, provide for landscape connectivity, protect highly suitable habitats, and will be managed to increase the quantity and quality of the habitat. The planning process for this Fern Ridge project included considerations that the project was or is within a draft HCA. We are also still operating under our current forest management plan, which has its own species and habitat protections. On this slide, you can see the streams in the area. You'll be given more information about the riparian and aquatic portion of the plan later in the presentation, but this map gives you some context for where those riparian areas are located. And finally, for resource considerations, there are also remnants of a historic logging camp in the area that are considered historic resources. So moving on to the forest management component. The forest management component of the Fern Ridge project has been designed to restore safe access to the forest, produce revenue, and to create monitoring opportunities while protecting resources in the area. The project will include planting and harvesting. Excuse me. This plan is not yet finalized, but we are currently considering 4 treatments as part of the plan. This is a plan that has gone through several iterations of thoughtful review by all the specialists involved in the project. We've put a lot of effort into developing this version that we think carefully balances the components of greatest permanent value in an area with so many considerations. The first treatment is a safety-focused hazard mitigation partial cut to open the road system to the public and contractors. That's the orange color on the map there. Trees within the hazard mitigation area will be looked at individually to assess hazard potential before being cut. It won't be a wholesale removal of trees within the hazard mitigation area. The next treatment in the project is a 13-acre no management area. We are considering no management here because it is the closest area in the plan to Shelburne Falls, and compared to other areas in the plan, there are many standing green trees that survived the fire. And we also saw significant regeneration in the field. The no management area also had similar pre-fire stand characteristics to other areas in the plan, which could be valuable for future comparisons of results from our monitoring program. And the next treatment is a 14-acre modified clear cut and replanting that will be done in an area of high burn severity. The modified clear cut would be outside the view shed of Shelburne Falls, but positioned along the trail system, which gives us future opportunity for education and interpretation to compare the different forest management strategies we plan to implement. Also, the volume from this modified clear cut plus the roadside hazard removal will get us to the volume target of our implementation plan for FY22, fiscal year 2022. The last treatment in the plan is an 18-acre underplanting area where no harvest will be conducted, but we will underplant throughout the unit. We are proposing this treatment here because very little natural regeneration was seen during post-fire field visits. So by planting through the burned area, we will accelerate the recovery process. And with that, I will now turn it over to John Walter to give you some additional details on our reforestation plan for Fern Ridge.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is John Walter, and I'll be covering the young sand management reforestation portion. So here are basically 3 pictures that give examples of what we're talking about. With the natural seed in, the picture on the left, that's a seedling from a seed. The middle area is an area that we underplanted this last year, but it's an example of what we would be doing. There's a little green tree right in the middle there that you can see. And on the right, you have a picture of basically initial planting after the overstory removal. And those are what we are planning to do on this Fern Ridge project. So now I will pass it on to Jamal to cover recreation.
All right, again, Jamal Reb, Recreation Planning Coordinator. The Fern Ridge project lies within the Shelburne block of the Santiam State Forest. And within this block, we have 1.5 miles of hiking only trails, 4.5 miles of mountain bike only trails, and 3.5 miles of multi-use non-motorized trails. So those include equestrian, mountain biking, and hiking. Our restoration recovery goals are really quite simple. We will be repairing damaged infrastructure impacted by wildfire. And while we do this, we evaluate where we can reduce infrastructure need by either trail realignment or make repairs using natural materials to reduce future maintenance needs. Upgrades to recreational opportunities will be made to safely allow the public to experience a wildfire impacted environment and support educational and interpretation goals associated with wildfire restoration and forest management. With the Fern Ridge project, we'll be addressing fire damaged hazard trees along access roads, parking areas, day-use picnic areas, and around existing recreation infrastructure, such as our picnic shelter and our bathroom or restroom. So there's some short-term changes that will be made to this, the Shellberg recreation area. And we'd only, once hazard mitigation work has been complete and trail repairs and infrastructure repairs have been made, we'd be open to day use only. And we'll reintroduce overnight opportunities when a suitable site is developed. And that really concludes my short portion with recreation. And I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Deardahl, our riparians and aquatic specialist.
Thanks, Jamal. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Sarah Deardahl, the Aquatic and Riparian Specialist for State Forests. And I am happy to give you an update about the riparian and aquatic habitats in the Fern Ridge project. Early after the fire, the division enacted several policies with the intention of protecting water quality and in-stream habitats through process protections. These include larger riparian buffers on salvage harvest layouts after January 2021, no harvest in riparian buffers, even in moderate to high severity conditions. And with respect to danger trees, which you've already heard a little bit about from Kyle and Austin, when they're found within riparian management areas, the prescription is to fall and leave, meaning that the fellers will fell the tree within the RMA and or even the creek where possible, jumpstarting those habitat creation processes. We have several questions about how aquatic and riparian habitats respond post-fire, including effects of our management. To answer these questions, we have recently completed our first year of riparian vegetation monitoring. I'll call your attention to the photos on the left of the slide. The top photo is a hemispherical photo or a photo of the riparian canopy in one of our permanent monitoring plots. Through these photos, we can measure the amount of shade produced by the riparian canopy. The bottom photo is of natural seedling regeneration, also in one of our riparian monitoring plots. Next year, through a partnership with OSU and USGS, we plan to add water quality and soil health monitoring as well. We do have some active restoration efforts planned for the Fern Ridge project, including riparian planting, which will be underplanting within selected burned RMAs, as John mentioned. And we also plan to decommission a culvert on Shellberg Creek upstream of Shellberg Falls. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the ongoing partner coordination in the Santiam Canyon. Many folks are interested in active recovery of the canyon as well as monitoring conditions post-fire. These folks have helped frame our monitoring questions and consider cross-boundary management approaches. That concludes my update for aquatic and riparian habitats for the Fern Ridge project. Now I'll hand it over to Colleen, who will talk about wildlife.
Realize I'm still on mute. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colleen Kaiser, and I'm the State Forest Planning Manager, and I'm filling in for the wildlife biologist who is out of the office today. Earlier in the presentation, Austin discussed the different treatment options that we'll be utilizing within the project area. And what we wanted to point out is that other projects within desired future condition, habitat conservation areas, or terrestrial anchor sites could also be designed to look similar to this parcel of our ownership, minus the moderate and high burn intensity component. Similarities include the fact that there's varying stand densities, patch cuts. We're utilizing skips and gaps, underplanting, and having a high snag and downwood component in the areas. Specifically, the habitat contributions for this project include higher green tree, snag, and downwood retention than the forest management plan minimum requirements would have us do in other areas. There will also be more vertical and horizontal stand diversity and a component of early sterile habitat. With that, I'll turn it over to Tyson.
Thanks, Colleen. My name is Tyson Weprick. I'm the Adaptive Management Specialist. And just as Sarah was talking about aquatic monitoring, I'm going to talk about some of the forest monitoring plans we have with this project. So since we have 3 different management treatments like Austin talked about, we have a good opportunity to learn from the forest response to our management after a fire. So we plan to establish fixed radius permanent plots in these 3 treatments, and we're going to track forest structure and revegetation through time. And I'll just go over a few things that we're particularly interested in, including canopy mortality, to see if any of the trees that are green right now that we leave will die over the next few years after being stressed by the fire and the drought. And we're also interested in how that mortality will affect the structure heterogeneity, which is important for habitat quality. We'll also be tracking snags and down wood and how those develop through time. And we'll see how the treatments affect seedling growth. You know, we're curious whether natural regeneration will provide enough seedlings and how the growth of those seedlings will compare to those that we plant ourselves after harvesting the canopy. And we'll also be tracking invasive species in the understory, as we're doing in the aquatic monitoring as well. And our monitoring considerations, this is going to be a long-term response, and we're not entirely sure how the different treatments will look decades into the future, but we hope that we learn from this for future fire responses. And we're doing monitoring in other places in the Santiam State Forest with different post-fire treatments. And so these 3 treatments will be compared with other places so we can have a better picture of post-fire responses to management. And the other consideration that will be for us is to think about how to minimize the impact of permanent plots in a high recreation area. So thank you, and I'm going to pass it off to Denise.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Denise Berkshire. I'm the Interpretation and Education Coordinator for State Forests. In interpretation and education, our current efforts have been focused on a documentation package on the Santiam State Forest, including the Fern Ridge project area before, during, and after the Labor Day fires to capture key components of the story. We recognize that there's a rare opportunity to capture real-time events and resources as the story unfolds. And we have been proactively collecting fire impact and restoration documentation that will allow for future interpretive opportunities and monitoring forest change over time. So some examples of items in this documentation package would include capturing visual representation of the forest. So in this photo, you can see here a post in the front, which is referred to as a picture post. We have placed these posts at designated locations throughout the Santiam State Forest, with 2 in the Fern Ridge project area, and staff and eventually the community will be able to contribute their images to a database to document change over time. We've also been documenting operational procedures, so including the post-fire assessment, the complex forest planning efforts, so all the work you just previously heard, and future operations on the landscape. So in addition, we're detailing potential future opportunities in interpretation and education with suggestions and ideas, which includes some comparisons to the Tillamook burn. For example, the wind event was similar, and unique opportunities at the Fern Ridge site may provide different approaches and potential opportunities because there is connectivity at this location. So there is a potential for visitors to access information via their cell phone, which is fairly uncommon in a lot of state forest areas. So this documentation package will be rolled up into planning efforts, including the forest management plan, to identify the future vision while providing a needs assessment to implement these interpretation and education opportunities for work that's currently happening beyond work that's currently happening in the Tillamook State Forest at the Tillamook Forest Center, where we're connecting people on state forest management and how forests touch our lives daily, from the products we use to the water that we drink. So with that, I will now pass the baton on to Jason in Public Affairs.
Jason in Public Affairs, and I'll be sharing a few key takeaways as well as our public engagement plans. So recognize how this area is handled. Post-fire requires thoughtful consideration of the social, economic, and environmental values that state forest bylaw must provide to Oregonians. Specific to this site, this included restoring safe public access to a popular area, restoring trails and recreation infrastructure, monitoring a variety of post-fire landscape treatments, harvesting 1.5 million board feet of timber, which will help finance recovery efforts and provide revenue to local communities, identifying interpretation and education opportunities, habitat contributions such as leaving green trees, snags, and retaining downwood, protections for aquatic habitat and water quality, scenic protection, and focused public engagement for an area that's popular with recreation users. And I'll outline the engagement portion on the next slide. So as far as next steps, here's what you can expect. The State Forest Advisory Committee has heard a version of this presentation and provided feedback, and their next meeting is this Friday, October 29th. And today is an opportunity to learn about the project and ask questions. This video will be uploaded to our YouTube page for those who couldn't be here or would like, if you'd like to go back and review any portion of it. This plan will go out for a 30-day public comment period in early November, and that will include a survey on how the agency should go about meeting its social, economic, and environmental goals specific to this project. When the comment period closes, planners will review what we hear and consider adjustments based on that feedback. The final document would then be submitted to the North Cascade District Forester for approval. We expect to open the comment period on Monday, November 1 for 30 days, which would then close on November 30th. You can provide comment via the website, which will have links to the public survey and ways to provide written comment. And this information will be posted to the Santiam State Forest Recovery and Restoration page on the ODF website as well. And it all starts at oregon.gov/ODF. Next slide. And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take questions now. This is intended as an information session. So for comments to be considered as part of the planning process, you'll want to make sure you submit those during the public comment period. But with those, if you have questions, please use the raise hand function and I'll try to call on you in order. Hi, Darlene, go ahead.
Hi, for the Fern Ridge area, and you described the proposed treatments and so forth, but how large is that whole Fern Ridge area and what acreage of that burned?
Ron, do you have that information, or maybe Kyle would probably have it?
Probably best suited.
Yeah, I would say, Darlene, that the entire project area is approximately 60 to 80 acres. And as Austin showed on that slide, a majority of that general vicinity Shelburne Falls Fern Ridge area was in the high to moderate severity burn.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. Wow. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Did anybody, well, we got folks here. Oh, hi, Seth. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just going off that last question, with 60 to 80 acres included there, or with that project area, and yet what was shown here was, if I'm doing my math right, you had 14 acres in the sale, and then 13 acres outside of that. There's a lot, you know, that only adds up to 20, anyway, 23, 4, 5, 6, 7, 27 acres. Where's the rest of the 80 acres in that area that were highly to moderately burned? What's the plan there?
Seth, I don't know if you were here for the middle part of the presentation or not. but Austin kind of outlined the different treatment areas, and he might be best suited to kind of repeat that at a high level, what's happening in those units.
Sure. Yeah, basically there's a variety of treatments that are being planned to be conducted on those areas, including underplanting in burned areas, the modified clear cut, as you said, no touch areas, and also the hazard mitigation partial cuts. And because of the large variety of resource considerations in the area, that's why we chose to go forward with the plan as described.
Okay, fair enough. So, but wasn't that all within the 27 acres that you had shown? I didn't hear any other acreage besides that 13 and the 14 until Kyle shared a larger idea of somewhere around 60 to 80. Or am I missing something?
I don't know if 60 to 80 is like exact, but so we have the 14 acre modified clear cut, the sorry, let me pull up my notes.
I guess this is Kyle again. So that 60 to 80, to answer Darlene's question, was, I guess, from property line to property line, that kind of southern extent of the general Shelburne vicinity. Within that, you have the roadside hazard treatment area, the 3 treatments Austin discussed, and then various other areas with riparian buffers, trail systems. So that's kind of where you get to that total 60 to 80 that I was talking about.
Yes, that goes to my question. Like in these areas that are currently white, they're still within the boundary of the property boundary, but outside of any of the hashes for roadside or treatment or non-treatment, frankly, there's just white space, and yet those areas too were listed as moderately to severely impacted by the fire. What's the plan there?
Yeah, Seth, those areas are at this point not planned for harvest. Given all of the resources in play here and planning considerations, this specific place on the forest, we've taken an approach to, relatively light approach to harvesting, just that 14 acre modified clear cut plus the roadside access, restoration work and safety work. And then, establishing the foundation for an education, interpretation, and monitoring opportunity is what we've done. And the other portions outside of that project area, we delineated these specific areas because of the trail system and how we intend to manage this as a project going forward and monitor it as a project going forward. Those areas that they're white are not intended to be harvested at this point.
This is Liz. If I could just add on there a little bit, expand really on what Kyle and Ron and Austin have all said. So we have that characterization that influences our management decision that's in our current forest management plan that establishes these areas would be managed for complex structure. So that's a big driver in the decisions around what to do, even though these areas have been burned, that classification still stands. So that's one reason why there's this mixed approach to harvest, in addition to what Ron has said. And then as it happens, that area is also proposed as a draft habitat conservation area under the draft HCP that we're pursuing. And so this is an intent to recognize that that's on the horizon. And in doing so, what kind of decisions can we make out here that honor the current forest management plan? And as it happens, those considerations happen to spatially align with those draft HCAs.
Okay, so safe to say there's a lot of ground here that will have standing dead trees on it long after the harvest or any management has taken place.
Yeah, that's absolutely safe to say. And then a mixture of, as was explained earlier, a mixture of approaches to reforestation. So some of these areas are going to be underplanted.
Okay, I've got hands up from Christine Samuelson, and then Darlene, I'll come back to you.
Actually, my wife just stepped aside. My name is Lee. I just want to put a suggestion on your management plans. And I think this related to the last guy's comment that while you show the harvest areas, the riparian zones, I think it would be helpful as far as your selling and engagement to the public to show the areas which are completely burnt reprod areas. Particularly, you can see right where you have your restroom flagged. And I'm the landowner, the neighbor on the road here, but it might be helpful to when you share the public the big areas that were completely decimated. They're going to be completely replanted. So where your forestry, where you make the L and the lands go off to the west there above the restroom sign, I think on that screen. Yeah, those are big areas where it's just a burnout wasteland right now. So I think when you kind of show your plans to the public, that maybe it'd be good to draw those areas on the map that shows where there is no, there's no trees left. All your 10-year-old reprod was completely burnt. And work, because it has been previously, a lot of those areas were clear cut 15 to 20 years ago. So those all are going to be, I'm assuming, complete replanted areas.
Lee, this is John Walter with the Young Stand Management. So those young stands that are up there are actually going in the plan to be planted this year. That's part of the 27,000 or 2,700 acres to be replanted this year. So those young stands to the north will get replanted in the next several months.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I know you guys get a lot of comments from the public as far as what's being done and stuff, but it might be helpful just to show that's all additional work that and hard work. I'm trying to give you guys credit on that. That's being done by your office as well too, to kind of do your recovery efforts. So.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing there is it could be useful to have some context of work that's already taken place in the general vicinity. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying it might be good to show those on your drawn out maps for people can see that it's not areas of the forest. People see this and it's hard to tell what's areas with trees, which was versus 10-year-old reprod. And that people might get a negative view thinking that you're just not doing anything in areas, but just by drawing the circles on there, showing that these are complete replanted zones might be helpful to people to get a picture of what's being done. So.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I think that's really good input.
Yeah, I'd also just like to add that there are north of that flagged Shelburne sign, it says Shelburne Falls. There are quite a few green trees in that area to the west of there, and also to the north, by picnic shelter and all throughout there. And that was looked at when the harvest considerations were being made, and those areas were true mosaic, but they did have quite a bit of standing trees, although there's mortality there. And given those considerations Liz mentioned, particularly that was actually potentially complementary to those long-term stand characteristics for the HCA, particularly. Back to you, Jason.
Okay, Darlene.
Okay, thanks. So I'm actually very pleased to see some of the components of the plan, which were actually things that I recommended in my previous comments on the plan in terms of in the riparian areas, that if the hazard trees are cut, they are left in place and so forth, because these are part of the future habitat conservation riparian areas. So question is, so the entire area that we're talking about today is within the proposed habitat conservation area? Is that true?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other areas that have already been subject to timber sales that were also habitat conservation area proposed areas?
There's a few, Kyle, you may know the acreage. There's a few acres that were included in those sales early on. There's not very many, but there are a few acres within the habitat conservation areas.
Now, to be clear, are we talking about at the Shelburne Falls in this area or across the whole Sandia?
Across the whole, we've just talked about the one that's in this area, but for previous areas that have already been subject to timber sales, were some of those.
I don't have the acreage right off the top of my head, but I know there was a small portion in that Niagara Restoration timber sale, where on the first slide I actually had a picture of that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. Let's see. Was there another question there from our neighbor, or you just still got your hand up? Okay.
I think that was directed at Lee, correct?
Yes,
Jason?
yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to get my hand back down, but yeah.
I'll
no,
take care. I'll lower it for you. Don't worry about
Okay, that's all. But anyway, thanks for all your time.
Appreciate that and appreciate you being a great neighbor to us. Really do. Other questions? With that, Colleen, maybe we move to the, let's just put the slide up towards the end that has the public comment options. There we go. So we do anticipate starting this comment period on Monday. If you're on our email list, you'll get a notification of that. And you can also, if you want to provide comment, take our survey, or just sign up for updates, you can do all of those at oregon.gov/ODF. Oh, and there's also, and Seth, I'll get to you in just one second. You can mail those comments to ODF Public Affairs at the address there in Salem. Yes, Seth.
You may have said this, but I might have missed it. When will the trail be open for interpretation? Like, what's the planned date for opening that for folks to come out? I can imagine there might be a few people that would be interested in seeing what it looks like.
Ron or Kyle, one of you guys want to take that on?
Yeah,
I can say there hasn't been a definitive date set, but they can give you a little more detail.
That's right. But Seth, the timing for the whole operation is, you know, the sale will be, the project will be put together, the operational components, the roadside salvage, and then this 14-acre modified clear cut would be sold sometime in the late spring with a contract completion, you know, date in probably December, but the work would hopefully occur during the summer. So we're still, you know, more than a year out probably at this point from getting to that place. And we're still working through the details of the plan related to getting that into, you know, fulfillment or for, you know, there, but it's going to be at least a year.
Thanks.
Yeah, we do have a resource, and I'm going to try to find it on the fly here. So excuse me if I stumble a bit, but we do have a pretty solid interactive map that shows burn severity and imagery, actually very high quality photography that can give you an idea of conditions that were on the ground after the fire. And I will drop that link in the chat. And I'll add that it does not work well in Microsoft Edge, so recommend Chrome, Google Chrome, Firefox, one of those browsers. Other questions? Well, with that, want to thank everyone for coming. And you know, we're interested to see what comes in on the comment. The ways you can do that are listed there. And just again, thank you. This video will be posted to our YouTube channel, and I'll drop that link in the chat as well. Expect that in the next couple of days. And send this back over to Ron to close us out.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, and thanks for everybody who presented here today, and you all for taking the time to learn more about the Fern Ridge Forest Management Project. We know it's a special area that Oregonians love and heavily use, and they have over time. We've known it's a place that's going to draw people back to our forest as soon as it's available for them to come to, and we're just really trying to be thoughtful and intentional about how we approach the post-fire recovery there, and really capitalize on any potential learning opportunities or interpretive education opportunities in a place that we know people are going to continue to come back to for many, many decades there to help really monument this, catastrophic event and hopefully once in a generation event that occurred there. So again, thank you all for taking the time and appreciate your participation in the survey to give us any feedback you have over the next month. So thank you. With that, we're concluded. So have a great afternoon.
Everybody,
Thanks,
thanks so
everyone.
much for your time.
Thanks, Ron.